never makes mistakes. No symptom is ever random, no symptom is ever there by chance. There is always an in-depth process occurring within your mind and your body that leads your body to become symptomatic. This is something I go into in depth in the previous episode. I won't touch on that now, but I'll start by saying this. If you look at the function of any organ or tissue, that gives you a little bit of an insight into a root cause and a reason. With the case of eczema, which is affecting the skin layer known as the epidermis, and I refer to eczema, but this is also psoriasis, but psoriasis is a little bit more complex. There are more layers to psoriasis because it's actually multiple beliefs and emotions and traumas happening at once at different stages of the regeneration and stress cycle. Now, the stress cycle and the regeneration I talk about in the previous episode. But let's go into understanding that when the skin is showing red, itchy, flared symptoms, it is your body actually attempting to rejuvenate and heal. And I'm going to explain what that means now. So if you think about so what is it trying? So what is it attempting? So what is it attempting to heal from? It's attempting to heal from what is the root cause of eczema? A separation conflict. The function of the skin is touch and connection. And if someone experiences some sort of emotional event where they are separated from someone and they don't want to be, or they want to be separated from someone and they cannot be, then the skin is the potential area that will show you that there is a separation conflict occurring. When someone is in the stress phase of a separation conflict, we do not see any symptoms. So the body is always trying to produce more cells to help function better or remove cells in order to help function better. And I already talked about this in episode 17, so you're going to be sitting there going, oh, damn, I'm going to have to go back to that episode. Yes, you are, because I'm not going to go into that here. But in the state of stress, the skin thins out. Why is it thinning out? Remember, the body is always trying to adapt and resolve something. And so if the body is in a separation conflict, the skin cells thin out. They get thinner because they are trying to create more sensitivity in the skin in order to make the skin more sensitive to touch. And so during the stress phase, there are absolutely zero symptoms. You wouldn't even know that your skin is actually going through some sort of a thinning out process. When we have a relief moment around separation, so for instance, let's say a young child is sent off to preschool and they don't want to go, and then they get really upset about that, and so their skin starts to thin out in order to get sensitive to touch, and there's a thinning out, often in the inside of the elbow creases or the inside of the knees or both, or on the hands or the face. We will then see the child have a moment of relief where they are reconnected with mum or dad, And then they get put back into stress again because they go off to preschool again. And so we might not see symptoms for a period of time. And then finally, the child goes, oh, I see what's happening here. I go to preschool because that's what I do. That's what my parents have got me to do. But I know that at some stage, I will return to mum and dad and everything is all right. So the child has a relief moment. Now, in that moment, when there's a moment of relief, the brain sends a signal to the cells of the body. The cells of the body say, right, we don't need to go through a separation conflict anymore. Stop thinning the skin out. Let's now start to repair the skin. So let's start to rebuild the skin by bringing in excess cells. And of course, what are the excess cells? The red, hot, itchy, inflamed moments, and then the dry, flaky skin. Because at one stage, when something was taken away, which was the skin cells, they now need to get returned. But in order to return, they need to go over and above baseline to then create a thicker layer of skin, because the skin is always trying to build back stronger than it was before. The same as with broken bones. If you break a bone, it's usually because it had been thinning out, and then it gets snapped from some sort of impact, and then it repairs stronger than it was before. And most people know this. Most people know that if you break a bone, it will repair stronger than it was before. Yet the reason that eczema doesn't heal once that relief moment has occurred is because the psyche, or the emotional mind, brain, body connection of the person, has got stuck on a track. Now, a track is when a belief has been created around separation. There are strong emotional triggers around the theme of a separation. And now the body is going to get stuck on a track of the theme of separation. And if you think about a railway track, they don't have a lot of off-roads. Once you're stuck on that track, the theme will remain. And this is why you'll often see adults who have had lifelong eczema that was originally triggered by something like a birth trauma event or a separation that occurred in their lives, such as separation from parents, family, etc. And I'll go into some of the themes we see in children that are linked to the onset of eczema. So once the track has been established, the skin is now unable to go into a full round of repair, because we now have an emotional trigger that has not yet actually been resolved. And that is why, when dealing with eczema that has stayed around for quite a long time, we need to look into the psyche and the emotions of the person who has experienced the eczema flare-up. Now, if you think about this for a minute, why do steroid creams not work? And anyone who's had eczema will know that they do not work. It's because when you put on a steroid cream, it is attempting to reduce the flaky, dry skin. And in the process of doing so, what it's actually doing is thinning the skin out again, putting the skin back into a stress response, which is the thinning out of the skin, which then requires the skin to go into a rejuvenation once you stop using the eczema cream. Now, the eczema cream, therefore, is actually creating a problem because it's not allowing the body to go into a full healing or repair. Often with children, we see a full repair occur simply from the healing touch of the mother. So they may have experienced a separation conflict, but then they go into a healing response because they are now receiving the connection that they so desired, which is the touch, the applying of the moisturizer of the mother. Now, in some instances, if the separation is caused through a birth trauma, then even though they are connected to mum and they are experiencing a connection to their mother throughout their life, the reason that the eczema stays is because the original root cause trigger has not been resolved. And so my work in establishing the root cause of eczema with a child is to always work through the mother, because when I work through the mother, I am able to get to the point in that child's timeline where they had a significant emotional trigger that then leads them to have an eczema response. And the thing that I really want to emphasize with eczema that really blows people's minds is when you see the red, itchy flare up, it is not the skin getting worse, it is the skin getting better. And when I'm working on a timeline with someone and I'm looking for the flare up moments, I'm always asking the question, what happened just before the flare ups of the red, itchy skin where you had a relief moment around the theme of separation? And the amount of times the client will say something like, "Oh, I finally left my husband," or "I finally, got over the breakup with my partner," or "Yeah, my child was in NICU for 6 weeks, and then they finally came home." And then their skin got all red and itchy and inflamed. And of course, what we do is we assume that the flare up must be something to do with diet. It must be something to do with what's been put on their skin, what we're bathing them in, what we're washing their clothes in. And don't get me wrong, all of this is very, very relevant. But as I always say to people, if those things were the actual root cause trigger, if dairy was the root cause trigger, if wheat was the root cause trigger, if the washing powder you used was, then why doesn't everyone get eczema? And it's because there is something else bigger playing a part in this. And I would say in a majority of eczema cases, and please, this is not scientific data, so don't go and have a go at me here, but in most cases, it's because the root cause is actually emotional. And so I want to share with you a little insight into the theory of dairy being a root cause for eczema, and actually say that in many instances, it possibly is not. And so let me provide some context for you here. One example of where we may see an eczema flare up in a child related to separation, and then we make the assumption that it's because of dairy, is when we see a child come off breast milk, so there's the separation conflict from mother and gets put onto dairy. Now, if there's an emotional trigger for that young baby or child and they don't want to be separated from mum and they're coming off the breast too soon and they're getting put into childcare, so you've got these multiple separation conflicts occurring. I'm no longer on mum's breast, I'm getting put onto the bottle, there's dairy in the formula, I'm going to daycare, they're feeding me these things that I don't want because I just want to be near my mum. And please, I'll just say right now, if this is bringing up stuff for you and emotions, I see you, I hear you, you were just doing the best you could. There's no judgment here. This is just insight. Please just understand that if you can recognize what the trigger might be, now you have the possibility to help your child heal this. So you've got all these tracks occurring, tracks of separation from the breast, tracks of separation due to preschool, and then changes in food at that time of the emotional trigger. So it's not the actual dairy that's causing the issue, it's the separation conflict. And because the body keeps the score, the body remembers, oh, dairy. Oh, I know what I felt like when I first had dairy. Dairy must be bad, therefore I can't stomach dairy anymore. Now, I've worked with people with allergies, and the same thing goes. The actual item is not causing the allergic reaction, so it's not the latex or the peanuts. It's what was going on at the time that that food was introduced to the child. And if that food was introduced to the child at a time of stress, then there's going to be a felt sense mind-body connection around the stress of experiencing that food and the separation conflict. So how's that for mind-blowing? So this is why when we see people trying to give children a whole lot of dairy, take dairy out of the diet and nothing's working, well, that tells you that this isn't a food issue. This is something a lot deeper. And I have seen amongst my peers and colleagues, children be able to go back onto dairy after dealing with the root cause of the eczema, which was the separation conflict, that then allows the child to be able to tolerate the foods that they never used to be able to. Now, with the separation conflicts, these can be literal or metaphorical. So for some people, it could be a perceived separation. And quite a few clients I have actually seen eczema be triggered from childhood when their parents may have dropped them off at a family friend's or family member's house to be babysat, and the child is afraid and doesn't understand that mum or dad will be coming home. And so they go into this perceived belief that they are now being separated. And if that happens a lot, so if there's constant care of a child by someone else, then there's that reinforcement of the separation conflict, which I've already explained before. Now, how do I heal that? I heal that by working with the mother. Because if there's still a child under their certain age, they aren't going to know consciously what has triggered this eczema for them. But when I work with a mother and go back to events such as the birth experience, what happened in the womb, early childhood experiences, separation of parents, all those types of scenarios, then I am able to clear the emotional trigger for the child through the mother. And that is one of the most powerful things about this work, is that you actually get a 2-for-1 experience for mother and child. I recently worked with a young child who had eczema all over their feet, and it was so red, raw, and itchy. And after just one session of birth trauma healing with the mother, we were able to significantly reduce the eczema on this child's skin. I didn't work with the child at all. I worked with the mother specifically. The child was in the room at the time, and I'm starting to think maybe that is why the healing session was so powerful. But all of the work was done through the mother, and that subsequently led to the child experiencing a relief. Now, in terms of the location of the eczema on the body, this is actually very important to understand because where it is on the body indicates the type of separation conflict that may be occurring. So if we see the eczema on the insides of the body, so insides of the elbow creases, insides of the knees, behind the knees, on the hands, around the mouth, on the face, these are often separation conflicts that we see in children, and it relates to the child having a separation that they didn't want. And so their body is trying to attempt to resolve that separation by latching on. And so if you think about a child wrapping its arms around mother like a monkey or father and wanting to hold on tight, then that's why you see the eczema inside the creases of the elbows and the insides of the legs. If the eczema is on the outer limbs of the body, so it's on the outside of the arms, the outside of the thighs, the behind the back, that is often a separation that we want to have, but we can't have. In other words, there's someone that we have to have contact with, and we don't want to have contact with them. And once we finally get that moment of yes, they're out of my life, get away from me, because if you think about the arms pushing away and flicking someone away as if to say, get away from me. Even the tops of the hands and the feet is a physical, I want to get out of here. I want to physically separate and walk away, because feet symbolize movement and hands symbolize trying to grasp hold of something or push something away from us. Then you will see an eczema flare up after a wanted separation finally occurs. Yet with each child and adult, it's very different. So we always have to ask the client, what does this part of the body represent or mean to you? People who feel separated from their creative pursuits quite often may experience a flare-up of eczema on their hands, on the palms of their hands and their fingers. I've heard stories of people getting eczema on their ring finger, their wedding ring finger, after a separation from someone. So when they finally remove their wedding ring, or they're thinking about separating from their partner, and they may experience eczema on that part of the body that symbolizes that connection to them, which is the engagement finger. Now, I myself have healed a chronic eczema condition on my right foot, and this was from a separation conflict that originally stemmed back to when I was 17 years of age, where my first boyfriend used to tickle my feet. Now, how it all came about was probably about 15 years later, actually no, almost 20 years later, this ex-partner of mine, who I hadn't spoken to in about 10 years, had passed away. But when I found out about his death, I was really, really quite upset, because the nature of his death, which was suicide, was similar to that of was the same as my brother, which was also suicide. And he happened to be my boyfriend at the time of my brother's death. So there's a strong theme around separation, because the first time I'd worked on the eczema on my foot, it was related to my brother. And then when it got re-triggered again, it was the separation related to this ex-boyfriend. And during my training, I was asked to reflect on what did the skin represent to me, what was the color, what was the feeling in my foot. And when I closed my eyes and I really felt the energy in my foot, I had this huge wave of emotion come over me, and I felt this incredible grief and sadness at the memory of my ex-boyfriend tickling my feet was when I was younger. Now, the only other people that ever tickled my feet in my life were my mum and my dad. And so this was the symbolism of a separation on a metaphorical, figurative level, because this person hadn't touched my feet in decades, but my body remembered. And as I've said before, your body keeps the score. Now, I went through a healing process of removing the energy of that trigger and clearing the emotions, the strong emotions related to the deep grief of the separation of him passing away. And without putting any creams on my skin, without putting extra moisturizer on my skin, that eczema disappeared in a matter of days. I remember looking at my skin 2 weeks later, and there was absolutely no eczema on my foot. I recently had another flare-up of the eczema when I went away on holiday about a week after my fiance and I moved into our new house. And I turned up in this holiday destination, and my friend looked at my foot and said, "Oh, what's going on with your foot, Sonia?" I said, "I know I've got this eczema." Now, knowing what I know, the eczema had come up within a 24-hour period, and I just immediately sat there and went, hang on a minute, what do I know about eczema? It's a separation conflict. What do I know about feet? It's about moving forward in life. What do I know about the theme of separation for me? It's always related to partners and brothers and masculine people in my life. Why? Because it's on the right-hand side of my body. Right-hand side of my body is masculine energy. And then I thought about it, and I went, and also I'm right brain wired, and so same side of body means it's related to someone who is a peer or an equal. Peer or equal is brother, partner, boyfriend. So straight away I went, oh, this is related to the fact that I've just moved into my first home ever with my partner, and I am moving forward in my life with him. And I am no longer single, and I'm no longer separated from anyone. I am now connected, and guess who tickles my feet? My fiance. So all of that came to light in that little 5-minute conversation with myself. Within 24 hours, the eczema was gone. Gone. Looked down at my foot, wasn't even there. See, this is the power of this work. This is the power of looking at the mind-body root cause connection. When you understand that there is no separation between the organs and tissues of your body and your emotional landscape, you can start to see things very, very differently. And that is what was possible for me. And that is what has been possible for so many of the people that I've worked with. So I just want